Hello and welcome to this week's edition of the Bar Business Podcast, your ultimate resource for bar owners. I'm your host, Chris Schneider, and in today's episode, we are joined by Jordan Silverman of Starfish. Now, I have resisted on this podcast in talking too much about restaurant tech, and part of the reason is there's a lot of good tech out there for bars and restaurants. There's a lot of not so great tech out there for bars and restaurants. But Jordan actually approached me a while back, and we started talking. And Starfish is, to me, a unique platform that is really interesting. And Jordan has been in this tech space with working with bars and restaurants specifically for about 10 years, or I should say almost a decade. And because of that, unlike a lot of the tech that we see out there, this actually fills a need. Because I feel like one of the problems that we run into a lot with bar and restaurant tech is that it's some tech guy made it that has no clue what restaurants do. So when Jordan approached me, I was initially, I will tell you guys all, very skeptical, but we went through what he does and really has some cool stuff. And so he has developed Starfish, which is an AI-driven analytic and benchmarking platform. And I think Jordan will correct me here in a second if I'm wrong, but I want to say he's been at this for about 8-9 months. And what they've done is actually very cool. So with that, Jordan, thank you for being here, and I'll go ahead and let you introduce yourself and correct anything that I said that was wrong.
Chris, first off, thank you for having me. The part you left out is when I reached out to you at first, it was just to say, keep up the great work on the podcast. I've been a listener for the podcast for a while now, and I love it. So, first and foremost, great job to you. The podcast is freaking awesome. So I'm really excited to be here.
Well, thank you. And of course, we appreciate you being here because, like I said, especially when you get into restaurant financial tech, there's not a whole bunch out there that's really easy to implement and produces a good ROI. And I think you guys are doing that. So why don't we take a second and let you tell everybody a little bit about your background and the journey that led you to creating Starfish.
Absolutely. So, as I said, I've been doing restaurant tech for almost a decade, but I've actually been doing small business technology for almost 15 years. So, grew up in New York, went to school at University of Michigan, and while I was at University of Michigan, I founded my first business, and it was an advertising company. We did advertising in public bathrooms. Printed toilet paper, printed paper towels, ads in dispensers. And that was really my first foray into small businesses. So we worked with a ton of restaurants and bars and other small businesses. And that's really where I kind of got the small business bug. I saw how hard and how passionate these people are working for their business. And I just said, if I can do something to help make these people's lives easier, better, more profitable, that's great. So went from that startup into sales, customer success, go-to-market roles, and really always been focused on small businesses. I spent the bulk of my career, 7 years, at a company called MarketMan. So MarketMan is an inventory software. So inventory counts, ordering, recipes. It's such a necessity for any small business, bar, restaurant. Really doesn't matter if you've got inventory, you need a back of house. But what I found there was you're working on the system. The system's not working for you, you're working for the system. And what we heard from our clients over and over again was, okay, but now what? My cost of goods went up 2%. Why did it go up? What can I do about it? What now? So what we're really trying hard here at Starfish to build is a tool that can point you where to go and tell you what actions to take. The second thing we're doing is trying to show you, based on your peers, based on the industry, are you overspending or underspending in certain categories? And that was built for two reasons. So number one, when I ran my first business, I spent so much money on lawyers to edit contracts and bookkeepers and things that were just not needed, but I had no idea how much I was supposed to be spending on these things. And I saw the exact same thing happen in restaurants where we used to get asked all the time, all right, I'm running a 35% food cost. Is that good? My P mix is I'm selling 20% liquor. Is that good? What should it be? So we're really trying to help answer those simple questions, help you understand your costs, and then give you a step-by-step guide to lower those costs, all while building a software that we hope our customers don't use that much. And I can dig into that a little bit more. We're building a software that is supposed to work for you, not you having to log in and maintain every single day.
Yeah, and I think it's I'm glad you brought up benchmarking there, because that's one of the things that actually we are partnering on. So in the future, as I talk about, industry benchmarks on the podcast, we're actually going to be using Jordan's data. Because one thing that is very true in this industry is that most of the numbers that you see, most of the time, you Google, you say, what's good food cost, and you'll see 28%, you'll see 35%, you'll see all these different numbers. And at the end of the day, very few people can tell you where the heck that came from, except it was in an article in Nation's Restaurant News 15 years ago, and nobody's thought about it since. And one of the things that makes me really excited about this, like I said, is that benchmarking, because now when we have conversations on the podcast, I can refer to real data from real bars and restaurants that actually is accurate versus these industry standard numbers that we all have in our heads. We talked a few weeks ago about, is 55% really the right target for prime cost? Well, maybe, maybe not. And having real data is so much more valuable than relying on these just almost wives' tales of metrics that we should be hitting that nobody can actually point to where the data came from. So, one of the things though, and I also love how you mentioned that your goal is to make a product that works for you and that you don't have to really work, because we see really frequently that bars and tech don't always go hand in hand. Some of that is bar owners are reluctant to use new tech because they don't see a reason to, they don't want to. Some of it's a learning gap, right? We have a lot of bar owners out there that are not millennials, that are not Gen Z, and are not used to a digitally native environment. So they're kind of reluctant to move to the tech. But what are your thoughts as you think about the industry's reluctance in a lot of ways to adopt technology, on how AI and tech is going to affect the industry as we move forward here?
It's a great question, Chris. On the benchmark side, I want to tell a story. So I was listening to a podcast a couple months ago, and we were like really ramping up. And it was this like really successful restaurateur, runs like a big restaurant group. And they were asking about prime costs. And he was saying how like there's this amazing book called Restaurants That Work. And it's all about case studies and benchmarks. So I'm like, that's awesome. Like I'm going to be able to use that for Starfish. The book was written in 1992. So we have restaurants, like you're saying, still benchmarking. That's like pre-internet. Like we're not even talking like pre like Uber Eats. Like that's like pre-internet. So that's what people are still using. They're still referencing the prime cost that they were taught in culinary school. And it is a different world there. So that's what we're really excited for on the benchmarking side. In terms of restaurant technology, I get it. People are scared of technology because, in my opinion, it's two reasons. Number one, they're getting so many companies reaching out to them saying $50 here, $250 a month here, $500 per month here. And they're just getting knife cut after knife cut, right? And it's nothing big, but these are hurting their bottom line. So I think that's the first thing is like there's so many companies out there. And again, I'm one of them. I get it. Saying a few $100 a month here, a few $100 a month there, and that hurts. So I think that's part of what is causing them to be hesitant. The second is nobody gets into hospitality to sit in front of a computer. And as your business grows, you're spending more and more time in front of a computer, in Excel, in QuickBooks, and less time with what you actually want to do, being with customers, building your team, building a culture. So when I think of technology, I feel like, especially for restaurants, but small businesses, it's getting a bad rap for one, cost, and then two, I don't want to sit in front of a computer. I want something simple. So I think that's been like the hard part about technology. And I get it. As I said, like I come from a place where like I love Marketman. It's an amazing tool. Inventory systems are hard. They take time. Like building out your recipes, it's a necessary evil, but it takes some time. So I get it.
Now, as we look at kind of the way tech is going to impact things, and I think some of this will be generational, as some of the older owners retire and some younger owners come in that are more digital native, we're going to see more and more tech involved. But I feel also like there's a lot of fear towards AI in general, and when it comes to introducing it into bars and restaurants. And in some ways, I think COVID kind of hurt us because everybody went to QR menus, and then we realized, well, nobody really likes QR menus, right? Everybody was talking about kiosks, and then we all realized, well, outside of McDonald's, customers don't really want to order for themselves. Everyone was talking about at the table payments, but then you run into issues with the iPads or whatever, kind of interface you're using. They break, they're expensive, you spill water on them. And so there have been a lot of pushes towards tech in the last 4 or 5 years, and a lot of them have fallen back. So as a tech company yourself, but also just kind of looking at the industry, how do we get past that? Do we get past that? Or is this just kind of the natural progression of some tech we implement sucks and some tech we implement works?
I mean, there is truth to that, right? Like some tech is going to work and some tech's going to suck, and sometimes the tech that sucks is like a necessary thing and you need it, right? To me, I think technology should be to enhance the guest experience or to enhance what your team is able to achieve. That's what tech is about. So I think like let's just take like the max example, right? Like bartenders being afraid that robots are going to take over. I would love to go to a bar and have a robot serve me a drink one time.
Mm-hmm.
And then after that, I want to talk to the bartender. So it's really cool the one time I get to see it. But I feel like when people think of like AI and tech, like they're thinking about like losing their jobs and that kind of stuff. And I think there is a place for that for one-time experiences. But to me, where AI and tech becomes really interesting is how can it be used to take away the mundane tasks that nobody wants to be doing, and how can it enhance the guest experience? That's where AI and tech becomes really interesting to me, is those two things. How can it make guests have a better experience, and how can it make the existing team do what they want?
Absolutely. And I think to your point about the robot bartender, I think the perfect application of the robot bartender is the one you always see online, which is on a Royal Caribbean cruise ship,
I was gonna say like Disney
right?
World, right? Like how cool is it? Like you go to
Disney
Disney
World,
World.
yeah.
Yeah.
It's cool. It's awesome. You check it out. You get a drink and you're like, oh my God, this is awesome. This robot made me a drink.
Yeah.
But to your point, then you walk to someplace you can talk to somebody because
Listen, the robot
bars are
bartender is
not about the
great.
drinks.
The robot bartender is great for the Instagram post,
Yeah,
but it's for the Instagram
100%.
post.
Exactly. Now, you did mention, so your two things with tech that should work, it should either reduce mundane tasks or create a better guest experience.
Yeah.
So if we're using that as the litmus test for whether or not tech is good or not, how does Starfish fit into that?
It's a good question. So I have been the person who's in charge of building the financial plan. I've been the person in charge of going line by line, analyzing the P&L. And that's not fun. And there's not tremendous value to it. It's really about digging in. So what we're doing here at Starfish is trying to automate the P&L analysis, automate the cost and data analysis. Our goal is that instead of you having to export something out of QuickBooks, upload it into Excel, do some VLOOKUPs, know that it's going to break, and then try to troubleshoot, what we're going to do is we're going to do all of that for you, integrate with QuickBooks, read it automatically on a daily basis, and then on a weekly, bi-weekly basis, send you emails about, hey, this cost went up, here's why it went up, here's what you should do about it. So this way you can focus on being strategic and focus less on line by line reading, line by line reading. That's really what our goal is. So we're trying hard to reduce the mundane tasks.
Yeah, and I think because obviously I've looked at your product and I'm set up to look at benchmarks and stuff so that we can use them for the show. But what really struck me about it was, yes, a lot of bar owners are very good at reading their P&Ls. But let's be honest, there is a group of people in this industry that probably don't know their P&Ls as well as they should.
Totally.
But even those folks that are good at reading their P&Ls, it's one thing to look at it and go, okay, I made X amount of money. It's another thing to look at it and say, oh, well, I randomly decided to look at my cost for fruit and garnishes for the last 3 months. And, oh, that's ticked up 25% in 3 months.
Yeah.
Right? That kind of level of detail is not something that most people are ever going to do on their own because there's not really enough time. And in a lot of ways, it's the ROI on doing all that investigation is not necessarily there because you guys are automating that and then sending a list of, hey, here's some things to look at. You've taken out all that mundane BS work in the front end, and it's just now a report to look at. And sure, you can look at it and go, oh, well, limes, I know limes are going up, no big deal. I'm not going to pay attention to this. But there are insights in there that, well, to be really frank, if you paid me to find them, it would cost a lot more than paying for your software.
Yep.
Right. And let me be clear, because a lot of what I do is P&L analysis, and I go a little bit further than the software does in running different ratios and things. But for most bars, the level of insight you can get from those tasks exceeds what you're already doing. And what I love about it too is because it is automated in the system, especially if you combine what you're doing with some really good QuickBooks setup, some automated rules within QuickBooks, you've eliminated the delay to information. Because one of the biggest problems on the financial side of this industry is that it takes, the month is over. So let's say April numbers, right? Well, your bookkeeper got them to you on the 15th. So you might have gotten your April numbers 6 days ago. Well, it was the weekend. It was the NRA show this weekend too. A bunch of people weren't even in their businesses. They were in Chicago. People that were in their businesses, in a bar over the weekend, the last thing you're going to do is look at what your bookkeeper did for you. And so it might be early June before you're actually reviewing April. The combination of what you guys do with some rules in QuickBooks, you're getting that analysis before you've even thought to look at it. And so it increases speed to good information, which makes it easier to solve these problems on the front end before they snowball into something bad. And to me, that's super cool because I'm not aware of anyone else in the market that for a relatively low cost can give you that level of insight. And frankly, in my experience at least, it beats the insights you're getting from a lot of bookkeepers.
Yeah.
Because your bookkeepers, just like the bar owners, don't have the time to get into all that necessarily day to day.
Yeah, it's I totally agree with everything you're saying. We have a lot of different types of customers, but I'll just give like 2 examples. Like one of our customers, small, single location, full service restaurant with a bar. And I gave him a demo of Starfish, and he's like, Jordan, this looks great, but why would I pay you? Can't I do this all myself? And I said, 100% you can. Do you? And he said, well, no, I don't have time to do it. That's what we're talking about here, right? Like what we're talking about, you can do yourself. You can go line by line in QuickBooks, then you can run another report to see year over year, then another report to see how you compare month over month. Like, but why? Even if you do that, you're going to miss things. So that's what we're trying to do is everything that software does, you can do yourself. You don't need a point of sale system. You can use a cash register if you wanted to. But there's just no reason to. If technology can help A, save you time, and B, not miss anything.
Well, I talk a lot on the podcast about data-driven decisions. And this is just shortening that gap, right? Because you don't have to culminate the data. You don't have to analyze the data. You're getting analyzed data, and then you can just jump straight to the decision.
Yeah.
Now, you still might have to do some root cause analysis to figure out why that data is what it is. You still may have to do all sorts of different things. But you're cutting out, honestly, the hard, boring part.
And that's what we're really trying to do. And it's like, it sounds weird saying, but like Starfish isn't actually saving you money. It's showing you how to save money. You still
Hmm.
need to take the actions in real life to save the money. We're just going to show you how.
But again, that's more than most people's bookkeepers are doing.
Yeah,
That's more than a lot of the folks that work on the financial side with bars are doing.
absolutely.
And it's something, I mean, put it this way. I do some very detailed analysis of financials for folks.
What you do is
And
awesome. I've seen it. What you do is great. Don't undersell. What Starfish does is amazing, but it's also not a replacement for the in-depth analysis.
right. But I am starting or going to start using Starfish for my
Mm-hmm.
clients
Correct.
because even doing all the high level analysis, the rest of the analysis, it automates, it will save me time, right?
Correct.
And if it
Yeah,
saves me time, it's going to save a bar owner time.
absolutely.
And that's the whole thing here. It doesn't necessarily replace everything, but it replaces really the most mundane, the most difficult, boring parts of the financial
Yeah.
analysis and spits you out a list of things to do or places that you can, improve, which to me, again, is just, it's huge because most people aren't getting those insights. So I think generally we've covered why people sign up for your program, but is there anything else that we've kind of missed or haven't touched on so far?
I think the only other thing I'll say is you still need a great bookkeeper and you still need good data to use Starfish. Starfish is not going to work well if you don't have your P&L and your QuickBooks or Xero or Restaurant 365, whatever accounting system you're using. If you don't have a good bookkeeper, good partner, and good data, no software is going to be helpful. So making sure that you have a good foundation built is extremely important before you go run.
Yeah, that is definitely huge because I mean, whether it's what you guys do, what I do, there's a definite limitation of, the good old accounting saying crap in, crap out.
And listen,
And if you don't have the right data on the front end, back end means nothing.
at the end of the day, I think everyone wants a better life and more money in their pocket. But you can't start worrying about a better life and more money in your pocket if you don't know the basics. And I think that's one of the things that we really try hard to preach is understanding your costs is a preliminary step before you can start lowering your costs and increasing your profits.
Absolutely. And having everything set up in your accounting software to give you
Yeah,
that data is the pre-preliminary step, if
yeah,
you will,
correct. Totally. Yes,
right? Because
correct.
it's there's no way to generate good data unless you have the right inputs to do
No,
it.
no.
And that's something that Jordan and I have actually talked about at length prior to this podcast, and as we were looking at benchmarking data and all that, is chart of accounts organization. And I think we would both strongly encourage anybody listening to this, make sure you have really good chart of accounts organization. Make sure you have a level of detail that gives you something to analyze. Because if you just have sales, and I know I've said this ad nauseum on this podcast before, but if you just have all your revenue going to one account called sales, there's nothing that I do, there's nothing that Jordan Software does that will help you analyze that because it's too broad of a category.
And if you're listening to this podcast, like, and Chris, I hope I'm not overstepping here, but like, reach out to Chris because I've seen his chart of accounts that he uses for bar and restaurant owners. It's much better than what most people, if not everyone, is using. So if you're listening to this and like, what should my chart of accounts be? Like, as a fan of the podcast and as a fan of Chris, I've seen his chart of accounts. Like, reach out to him because he can help.
I appreciate that. But back on Starfish for a second. Do you have maybe a couple of success stories you could share with us about your clients and the results that have been produced by analyzing their data and just giving them simple tasks to look
Yeah.
at?
So first type of task we give are data entry issue tasks. So something might not seem right. So like the most common data entry things we see are like 2 rent expenses in 1 month or two utilities bill in 1 month, things like that. But we had something really interesting happen a couple weeks ago. So we had a restaurant customer where they're using like an OCR system. So they're scanning the invoices, it's pushed automatically to QuickBooks, and then gets paid. the invoice got captured as $10,000 instead of $1,000. Well, Starfish gave them a task, emailed it to them and said, hey, your food purchases went up. We think it's because you had an abnormal transaction. You've never had a transaction over $2,000. This one was for $10,000. We're flagging this. Well, it turns out Starfish was right. Customer called the supplier, got $9,000 that they didn't realize because they overpaid the invoice. So I think the first types of tasks we give are that, right? Where it's like overpaying, which happens. That's the first type of task.
Absolutely.
The second type of task we have is a little bit more strategic, I'd say. So one of our customers, 2 locations in New York, they run a quick service chicken lunch and dinner place. And when they expanded from 1 to 2 locations, their uniform supplier jacked up the prices at the second location, didn't match the first location. They didn't know this was going on. Starfish alerted them, said this is the date that it happened. Reach out to your uniform supplier. They call the uniform supplier. Uniform supplier says, let us check. Gets back to them the next day. You're right. That's our bad. They got $2,000 check in the mail. They got lower payment rate for both locations and net payment terms instead of COD, which is huge for a business. So I think like the first types of tasks we're giving are, hey, something doesn't look right. And the second task is where we're really digging in using AI, giving you directionally what's causing the increase. And we do that on food, labor, utilities, sales, everything. So that's a couple of success stories.
Very cool. And that's just for everyone, because we haven't mentioned this yet. What does Starfish cost to use?
Yeah, right now, $50 per month per location.
Okay. So if $50 saves you $2,000 or $9,000, that's a pretty impressive ROI there.
I was at the National Restaurant Association show recently, and I was talking to one of our clients, and we were just talking about how, like, in today's day and age, we think software should be at least a 5x ROI. Our goal is 10x your monthly payment in returns every single month. So we think if you're 2 locations, you're paying $100 per month. Success with us is trying to save you $1,000 per month. Now, keep in mind, $1,000 per month is actually $12,000 a year on repeat over and over. So that's where it really starts to compound and become super powerful.
Yeah, and that's the other thing I have to say, because when I started out this episode, I was talking a little bit about how I don't normally work with tech folks because I'm not always convinced on what they have. But that dedication to ROI, because it's the same way I think about clients, right? There's no reason, and I will say this, to pay for software or coaching or consulting or anything unless you're seeing some multiple of ROI.
Totally.
And when I go into my projects, I'm kind of around that same goal as you, that 5-10%. I want to be somewhere in there.
Yeah.
Because then I've really proved that I have some value to people. And so many folks, especially on the tech side, are not necessarily worried about that. Right. And it's so they're charging a lot for this product that requires a lot of manual input. That, okay, yeah, you're in a better spot, but are you in a 10% better spot than what you spent? Good luck finding out.
Yeah.
Actually, right?
Yep.
Because it's hard to measure ROI. But you guys and your dedication to that ROI, I think, is phenomenal. Because it's putting the customers first, right? It's doing the same thing for a bar that a bar does for their guests. And I really appreciate that about the way you guys approach things.
Yeah, happy customers is everything. Like if you don't have happy customers, it means nothing. And like that's for my business, for your business, for the listeners. Like just if you have happy customers and the product works, whether that's technology, consulting, or food and beverage, they'll tell other people about it. Like that's the main goal. It's just how do you create this flywheel? This word of mouth flywheel. That's the main goal.
Absolutely. So for those folks that are listening and they want to learn more, where should they go? Who should they get in contact with?
Yeah.
How do they, demo your system, things like that?
Reach out to me. So our website is usestarfish.com. You can email me, jordan.silverman at usestarfish.com. I'm also just happy to give my phone number, right? Like I'm easy. It's 954-800-3239. Text me, call me. Like we're here. I think I come from the customer service background. We're here. We want you to use the system. We know we'll be able to save you money. So reach out however you want.
And I will make sure all of Jordan's contact information is in the show notes. One other thing I will mention with his company, it's a very small organization. I think you said what? There's 4 of you total.
4 of us, yeah.
So it's not like working with some of these companies where you have 1,000 people working there and good luck finding someone that can help you. Jordan is there. He's watching everything. And from what I know about his customers, from what I know about working with him myself, you should be able to get a good response out of him really quickly.
Listen,
it's a very easy communication.
I am the CEO. That is my cell phone number. Text me. I'm here.
And like I said, we'll make sure we get that in the show notes. Before we go, Jordan, is there anything else you want to mention? Anything else you want to talk about? Anything that we didn't hit on that you think is important for people to know?
When it comes to like restaurant tech and AI, the final thing I'll say is dip your toes in. You don't have to go full blown. Eventually, you're going to want to do more and more because you're going to see how simple it is. But just dip your toes in. It's unbelievable what AI and tech can do, whether that's Starfish or something like a ChatGPT to help you with email marketing and loyalty. Just dip your toes in and you'll slowly start to love it, get more comfortable, and then really start to see how it can automate the things that you don't want to do. That's what technology is there for, to automate the things you don't want to do.
And just to build on that real quickly, I'm seeing more and more AI stuff used in the space. People are afraid of it. But whether it's Jordan's product, a month or 2 ago, we had on Jason Luttrell, who was talking about AI too, and using that for some marketing. Don't be afraid of it. Try it out. He's right. Use it. Some of it you'll really like, some of it you won't. But it's worth doing because one of the things that we talk about a lot on the podcast, one of the things that almost everyone that coaches in consulting and bars and restaurants talks about is you need to work on your business, not in your business.
Mm-hmm.
And this is the way to delegate a lot of tasks without a labor cost associated. So it's the ROI on AI stuff. And like I said, some of it people like, some of it people don't. Different people will like different products. But the ROI on AI in general can be really good as long as you get the right products from the right companies. All right. Well, Jordan, thank you so much for being here. Thank you for partnering with me for the podcast so that we have better data when we talk through financials and numbers with everybody. And again, just really appreciate your time and your partnership with the podcast.
Totally my pleasure. As I said, I reached out first and foremost as a fan, so I'm honored to be a partner. I'm honored to be here, and really excited to continue building together.
I am too. Well, that about wraps us up for today. So if you enjoyed today's conversation, make sure you like, subscribe, and leave a review. If you want to gain more insights on everything regarding the bar business and financials and all that good stuff, make sure you join the Bar Business Nation Facebook group. Great community of people there, and we're having more and more conversations all the time. You can also schedule a free coaching session with me to explore how we can collaborate and optimize your success and dig into some numbers for you. There are links for that in the show notes below. As I mentioned, we'll also have links in the show notes for Jordan's contact and Starfish. And with that, guys, I hope you all have a great day, and we will talk again later.